much for coming this afternoon to the Digitizing Cultural Heritage Materials Fundamentals and Best Practices. We're so lucky to have Aaron Brenner from the University of Pittsburgh here to explain this to us. So thank you for coming.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me here. Glad to be here. Yeah, so I just sort of introduced myself very briefly before Teresa came back. I will, let me just start by telling you a little bit about myself so you get a context of who I am and what I am doing in my job. So I work at the University of Pittsburgh in the library system. I work in a department in the library that does three things basically. First is does digitization of print materials. So it's primarily print, not AV materials, so it's books, maps, photographs, lots of archival manuscript material. That's the first thing. Second thing is we take those digitized objects and we build digital library collections out of them. That's primarily for the web access. So the building of collections means gathering objects together, indexing them so they're searchable and browsable, running the software that lets you, as a user, turn pages, perform searching, perform browsing, things like that. The third piece is we manage the repository of all these digital objects. So we've been about 12 years in the library of doing digitization. We have a lot of content now. That content, those digital objects, get reused in different ways. So just managing all of that content is the kind of third piece of what we do in the department. So this is where I work. This is like a reconverted warehouse that's kind of on the outskirts, sort of on the outskirts of the city. So this is not, I work for the University of Pittsburgh, but not on campus. If any of you were here for Miranda's talk, I think which was last week, she works on the floor below me. So that's the building that I work in, and this is the department that I work in. I just always like to show people the space that I work in because it gives you a little bit of a sense of what we do. These are two of our primary scanning, so a lot of scanners. So that phase of digitization that we do in our department is kind of the most visible thing. We've got these two scanners that have overhead cameras shooting down. In the back area, we have a couple of flatbed scanners where we do a lot of the photograph transparency and slide digitization, and the sheet feed scanner as well. But you know, we're a medium to small size operation, so we really concentrate on efficiency. We really only have about 5 or 6 scanners in the department, and we're staffed by 2 librarians. I'm one of those 2 librarians. 3 full-time staff who are the scanning specialists, and then a changing number of students under them. But I'd say never more than 6 students at one time. So some office space, some space to stage materials, scanners, plants. Anyway, that's where I work. All of the work that we do, all of the digital collections that we create are freely available. That's part of the mission, our strategy around digitization. And they're gathered together on the Pitt Library's website under this banner of Describe Digital Publishing. In our case, Describe is broader than just digitized collections. So there's a whole other digital library component in the library that's run out of the IT department that has to do with born digital collections. This would be our electronic theses and dissertations. It'd be our institutional repository. We have a platform for publishing electronic journals. So there's several electronic journals that are hosted at the library. And there are subject-based preprint archives. So this would be scholarly journal articles by discipline before they are submitted to a journal and accepted, are placed by the researchers in these preprint archives. So one is on the philosophy of science. There's one about European Union documents and so forth. So there's a pretty broad area of digital library activity that's all hosted by the University Library. it's all kind of gathered, at least the front door to it is all here, Describe. So if you were to go to Pitt's homepage of the library and click on Describe, although it might be called digital publishing, this slide's a little old. You can get to everything from there.
Aaron,
Yeah.
are these, all these things, do they put them into the online catalog whenever they?
We do at various levels, right? So in some cases, we're down to the item level in the online catalog. In some place, the catalog record is for the collection level. It varies. But that's a good question. And that's also a good opportunity to say, please interrupt me with questions. I'm really happy to have this be conversational and to match whatever I'm saying most closely to what you're interested in. Okay, so let's just start with the basics, and this is from the point of view, again, of a library, maybe, or an archives most specifically. And the basic question of why are we digitizing? Some of the things are perhaps obvious, but I think some are maybe a little less obvious. And I want to make sure that those are mentioned as well. So these are the most obvious kind of themes around why digitize that have been discussed for about 20 years now, I'd say. And they tend to fall into access and preservation. So access has really been, I think, historically the more compelling reason, because issues around digital preservation of digital assets and digital objects has been people are a little wary of it still. It's becoming a little less true, but for many years, I think the sense of digitization in libraries was really to provide a better access to content. So there are a lot of limitations to physical things, right? They can only exist in one place in time. Your facility, so somebody needs to travel to your facility at a certain time when you're open, and then only one person at a time can use it. Well, obviously a lot of those limitations can be overcome with a digital copy. It's available at any time to anybody around the world. Certain kinds of materials are also just better accessed. Things that are fragile, where it may even be that the curators don't want the public to have certain kinds of access. So increasing access in general. The second is preservation. So preservation, not so much in the sense of throwing something away because you digitize it, although that can be a consideration, but particularly in archives, I think the idea of preservation is around documenting the state of a thing at a particular time. So when we make, as we know, physical things change over time. They degrade, the colors change. They could be lost, stolen, damaged. So part of the preservation is just to say, have a record of the way a thing existed at a particular moment in time. All right, but there are some other benefits of digitization. So part of it, and this really follows the idea of capturing that thing, is the high quality representation of whatever it is you're digitizing really has multiple uses besides just putting it online. So I think people tend to think that the goal of digitization is to have something that you can put on a website. And that is true in many cases. But there are a lot of other uses that can be made of digitized objects. So they can be used in teaching. There are many cases in which we've gotten reproduction requests for publication in books. Around Pittsburgh, we often see businesses ask for our digitized photos to turn into murals or pictures that they hang on their walls, so it would be a historic view of the neighborhood that the business is located in. And those are just a few. But what I really want to encourage people to think about is that that by digitizing, you're creating a kind of a new information resource that has a lot of potential uses beyond just sort of reproducing a document on a website. Along with that same line, going even further down that same road, once you digitize something, particularly when you start to digitize many things and group them together into bigger pools of information, there are some new kinds of uses that open up. that could never have happened with a thing in paper form. So think about, just as an example, the Google Books project. So they've digitized, 10 million books or so. And the way you access them is, not by viewing them in a virtual shelf, but primarily by searching the full text of all those books. So that full text of all those books has been pulled out and is really like a big data set, really. So that's just one way to access books, but people are doing other things with big data sets of text from books. So they can track the pattern of usage of certain words or phrases over time. So if you have the text of all of these books, you know when each book was published. You can do kinds of analysis of the way words or themes rose or fell in the record of publication over time. So there's a lot of really interesting potential applications of using digitized documents that are beyond the idea that you're just kind of creating a facsimile of what was in print. Another example would be pulling geographic data out of a collection of photographs or books. So when we think about photographs, think about prints or slides, and they're very much a document kind of format where you're looking at a thing at a time and you're maybe flipping through a box of photographs or flipping through a box of slides. If you are able to, say, pull the geographic data out of those in the sense that you locate each photograph in space, you can do things like access that collection with a map interface. Instead of flipping through documents in a box, you're looking at a map of an area, and you may want to focus on a particular area or do queries like show me all photographs within a 1 mile radius of this point. That's a very different kind of model of understanding your collection of objects than you can do with their print or their physical format. So I want to make sure those concepts are out there. Okay, so the bigger picture of digitization, and this is to say that what I'm going to talk about, I'm really going to focus on a little narrow area, but when we talk about digitizing, and again, digitizing, even the word has different contexts. So talking about earlier, digitizing in the context of doing GIS means one thing, but digitizing that I'm talking about it's not just the scanning, right? It's not just the imaging, although that's what I think people tend to think of most. When I digitize something, it means I'm going to take a piece of paper and put it on a flatbed scanner, and I'm digitizing it. But a real program of digitization is much bigger than just the imaging piece. It's really part of, the idea is really creating almost like a new collection of things that happen to be digital. And if you think about the way that we treat collections in libraries, it's much more than just putting a book on a shelf, right? There's a whole service component, there's a descriptive or metadata component, which you can also just call the cataloging. Even if you look at cataloging, there's a whole structure around cataloging. Each library doesn't make up its own way to do cataloging. It's part of larger standards and agreed upon ways to do description of objects. There are long-term storage plans for physical libraries, and things have to be moved from one place to maybe an off-site storage if you run out of space. All of those same things are true in the realm of digitization.